Thank you for this great invitation. Never been here, and I'm super, super excited to know about this community, what you guys are doing. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about a little bit about nonprofit, about fiscal sponsorship program, and then Kelsey is gonna go in a very deep detail about what is this about and how can be an option for everybody here. But thank you very much. Right, I'm gonna to Kels to introduce herself very quick.
Thank you. And you already heard a little bit about our bios, but yes, I am super excited to be here with you all on this Friday morning still, or afternoon, I guess. I have had the pleasure of working with Juan and the TAP AZ team for the last 3 years, and just really appreciate the opportunity to get to meet small nonprofits or budding nonprofits through the work that we do with fiscal sponsorship. So yeah, just excited to be with you all today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kels. And yeah, myself is Juan Salas, director of TAP AZ. I'm oversee this program. We have 60 organizations in our platform. We've been doing this, and we are going to talk about a little bit more for years. And here in the screen, you can see our team. I'm gonna just very quick about everybody that you're seeing there. Next to me is Roy Pringle, the Chief Operating Officer. He's overseeing the program, the TAP AZ as well. And then, he works very close also with Vitals Health Foundation. Next to me, Blash Kalanchi, our senior accountant. He's dedicated to the accounting part, which is, all the accounting system and layers that every group needs to, have. Then Angelica Gerardo, she's in accounts payable, but now she's, doing a couple things in supporting the team in insurance and a couple of stipend programs that we have. And another benefit that we also offer about, Pericash, virtual Pericash money. Then Stephanie Gallegos, she assists us in all the entries and double checks in accounting and also managing the payroll for the organization. Cassandra Stray, she's a very new, team player right now. She's dedicated 100% in processing payments for all the groups that we have in AP. And then Sonja Perry, our grant coordinator. This position was open a couple months ago to support all our groups in seeking and looking for opportunities, in the field of the grant. We know that there is a very important piece, so that's why we have this position open, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about TAP AZ before we jump to what are the main topic. TAP AZ started in, around 2000, thinking about the opportunities for the community in Arizona. And between that date and then 2011, we matured the idea to start providing comprehensive fiscal sponsor for the Arizonans. And that's when the effective date that we started. And TAP AZ is focusing any kind of organization, project, or program that can offer a benefit for the community in the field of education and health. And what we are doing is to support these organizations as a back office, supporting with the accounting systems, with insurance, with payroll, with grant applications. So that way, these organizations, they can focus in their mission. It's very difficult sometimes to get resources for that. And then, and also to focus in the mission. So that's why we wanted to help a little bit in that part once they get a better, position to launch the organization. So that's TAP AZ. And our next slide, starting a nonprofit. This is very interesting thing because I've been working in the nonprofit sector for 4 years and 6 months and never been working in nonprofits. And I say, what does that mean for the community? What is a nonprofit organization? But not only that, more in deep, what is a fiscal sponsor? What that means for nonprofits. So it was a very interesting opportunity for me when I joined TAP AZ because, like I said, I never been working in this sector. So I realized that the nonprofits are playing very, very, very important role in the community. So knowing that, I start understanding that a nonprofit organization is just to accomplish public benefits. So when you create a nonprofit organization, it's about that, right? And also that this organization, once you create a nonprofit, the organization doesn't have an owner. So the community is the owner, which is an important what is a big difference between a profit organization and nonprofit? That's a big difference. Who is the owner? No one, the community, right? So that's the biggest difference between these things. Then also there's no shareholders. So we don't share, profit. These organizations, they don't make profit because I mean, in terms of make profit for the owners, I mean, the profit that we generate is going to be for the community, right? So, and then also all these organizations, when they start, they start with volunteers. They start with people that they wanted to do something impacting to the community, and they might not receive a pay for that. It's just the mission to support. And this is the interesting thing, how many people, they're thinking to do good things, but they don't know what is a volunteer, what is a volunteer program, right? So nonprofits has this opportunity. The profit sector, they don't have volunteers. They all wanted to receive a pay for what they are doing, right? So I'm not gonna, if I do this, then you need to pay me. Yeah, nonprofit, no. There is just our mission, our personal mission to support the organization. And then the other thing is that also we can provide or we can back to the community with the tax deduction. With this status, the organization can offer, a benefit for the donors, for the people that is working with the organization, with the tax deduction opportunity there. So more or less, this is what a nonprofit can be, right? And like I said, the biggest difference is, that the owners, there's no profit, volunteers. So that's that. Then I'm gonna talk a little bit about why does the jurisdiction matter. So when we are talking about to start a nonprofit, of course we think about where we are going to do this work. If it's gonna be, local where we belong, or the state, or a federal level. So when you think about this, you need to think about that if you are going to open a nonprofit in your local area, you need to know what that means. So if you need to follow some rules, what kind of rules do you need to follow? Oh, I need to go to open an account in this, chamber commerce because I need to register my organization. Okay, well, you can do that. And that's why you need to do in the local stage. But also, if you want to go to the state level, then you need to go and fill out, on the Arizona Commission, a request that you want to become a nonprofit. And that can be a state level. You can get that permit, and then you can get the status of a nonprofit based on the state. You don't need to go to the federal to get the IRS determination letter or the status of 501c3. You can be there. But if you want to do that, you can also register your organization, on the IRS, so that way you can get the status of C3. There is a lot of other kind of, nonprofit status, but the most common is the C3, the 501c3 status. And with that said, that is also important because if you do that, then your organization is allowed to provide tax deductions that can be applied for any donation you receive, but also support the estate taxes that can reduce the amounts of that. So that's why it's very important where you are going to open this organization, right? To understand the legal rules around you. So that's very important. Then next, Kelsey. Okay.
Thank you. So obviously we'll be covering a lot more information about fiscal sponsorship, which is a great alternative to establishing a 501c3. If folks already have a 501c3 established, there are still options for fiscal sponsorship support. So we'll talk through that. But we did also want to highlight a couple other collaboration opportunities that you might consider if you're thinking, I want to do charitable work. I want to work in a nonprofit, in the nonprofit sector, but I don't know if I'm ready or even want to eventually become a 501c3, but I want to serve the community. There are a couple other options. So there's fiscal sponsorship, which we'll get into. There's also maybe the opportunity to get involved in a coalition. So maybe there are like-minded, either nonprofits or for-profits or government entities that are all working to address a similar need that you're seeing in the community. So perhaps forming a coalition with these organizations could be an option to you starting your own 501c3. I will say there are certain dynamics with the coalition that are tend to be a little bit tricky sometimes, but we do provide fiscal sponsorship to coalitions. So that's something we can certainly talk more about. But yeah, just partnering with existing entities, if they are mission aligned, could be an option for you. And then in that same vein, the Arizona Together for Impact Fund is a resource that exists. It was put together, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago by Arizona-based funders and foundations, grant makers who saw a need in the nonprofit sector to increase collaboration. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, often there's only so much funding available, and we have a lot of nonprofits in Arizona. So the funders kind of saw this need and felt like maybe they could fill a gap by providing funding support if nonprofits are interested in exploring collaboration opportunities. So on one end of that could just be getting in conversation and providing collaborative programming with other nonprofits that are mission aligned. On the other end of the spectrum, it could be shared support functions. So maybe you share an office space, or maybe you share an accountant, or maybe it's a full-on merger acquisition. Really depends on the need of the organization. But that could be a good option as well. They do provide funding, and we'll send out links to all of these resources if you're interested in exploring. We're always happy to make a connection as well. But if it could also look like maybe what your mission is or the gap that you want to fill, and you're not sure if there are other nonprofits that are working in the same space, but you're interested in exploring that just to see like who you might collaborate with. There are funding opportunities through the Arizona Together for Impact Fund that will help provide the funding to do that exploration. So definitely wanted to highlight there are a few different options instead of diving right into a 501c3 to kind of consider.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that overview and to provide the different options that these organizations can have. We are going to talk about one of the most important things also to consider when you wanted to start a nonprofit. Sometimes we think about, oh, this is the idea, this is what I want to do it, because the reason that I want to do this is because I had an experience about a family or a friend, or I'm seeing in the community this gap and I want to do this. And maybe you started because you are very familiar with that. But at some point, we need to also to consider that a nonprofit is an organization, is kind of an area of to provide services, to provide opportunities for others, but to see that is a business area, then yes, it can be a business area. You need to understand what are the components of those. So one component that you need to go is create a business plan. What that means, a business plan, to understand the organization, where you at, what are you doing, what is your mission, what are your values, what is going to be the target population that you are going to focus in, how are you going to get these funds, do you need persons or volunteers, employees, how are you going to put this together? So a business plan is something that can guide you to create that foundation. Once you are doing this, sometimes there's areas that we don't know, we don't understand, and that's when these organizations needs a little bit help, right? And it's important to reach out to those organizations, like right now Change Labs. that they can offer, kind of resources that you can get from them. For example, marketing. What are the knowledge that I need to have about marketing? What are the ways that I can market in my organization? How can I, invite people to become a board member of this organization? If it's going to be just a board of advisory persons, or how you want to create the governability status. So what is going to be the bylaws, what is going to be, all these areas that is super important to consider when we are talking about an organization. So we are going to provide like a kind of a template of a business plan that you are going to receive for the people that is in the online. You're going to receive, I guess, maybe a link, or but that's gonna, of course, guide you to start thinking about this. I highly suggest, if you are thinking about a nonprofit or create a nonprofit, to start reviewing this document, just to, read it and try to understand why. Because every aspect of this template is meaning something. It's meaning something that is gonna help you to build the foundation of your organization, right? If you don't understand, I mean, that's okay. I don't understand a lot of things, so I need to go to their source, right? So TAPAC can provide also information, additional information and support for these areas and aspects. So the other also information that you are going to have in your package is the budget plan. You are going to have an Excel kind of report that you can fill based on years and categories. And then also this is going to help you guys to create an idea of how much do you need to operate the organization. What are the areas that you are going to, to cover with the money that you, or the revenue that you are, streaming to the organization. And it's very important to have clear in a paper or somewhere that you are seeing, in the regular basis, so that way you can, see what is the status of the organization. This is a very important thing that, a lot of people, they don't understand, and I get it. I remember first time that I see a budget, it's like, what is this? What that means, revenue, what is income, what is expensive, why I need to have all this information here, right? So there is an opportunity to review that, and of course, we are more than helpful to help you guys. And the last one is the fundraising plan. This is very focusing. How are you going to, have access to funds? What are the ways that you have, right? But first of all, we need to understand that if you go with someone or an organization or an individual to, you know, talk about your organization, you need to have very clear certain areas about what is your mission, what is the values, what are the, the problem that you want to solve, or what is the gap that you want to cover, because, you're seeing in the community that you lack of this. So you need to be very strategic when you are doing this, so that the potential donor can understand your mission. Without that, then it's difficult to reach out to someone, to ask for assistance. So the fundraising plan is going to guide you with all these components, and then you can also show this, but also not only show that, so you can also keep these donors for some time, that you can have, available for 1 year, 2 years. And it's important to how you are going to cultivate these donors. How are you going to, inform, communicate with them about what you are doing? Everybody, if you have experience to be a donor, in terms of, money wise, you can say, hey, I like to see where my money go, right? Where my money goes to impact this community or this project. So it's very reward to see that. So that's what important, the fundraising plan for your organization. So yeah, so far this is the overview of this. But if you have any questions, we can talk about.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions about anything we covered so far, feel free to jump in and then we'll move into fiscal sponsorship. Okay, so the question is, hi, I'm new to the business world, wondering if a for-profit business can have a nonprofit component. Do you want to take that?
Yes, definitely. You can have a nonprofit component. If you are an LC or a corporation as an organization, you can also have on the side a nonprofit, organization. But this is needs to be very clear. Separation of legal, duties, and always think about this. When you're thinking about the nonprofit, you need to think about the charitable purpose. And that's the key component. If you are going to open that, then you need to be clear in why you are going to be a charitable organization, that you are going to provide this, right? And that's the only way that you can create that. So it's not going to be a conflict of interest of your organization if you, set this very clear in your mission and what is going to be your programs. But definitely you can do it.
Yeah, one thing that we do talk about, because we have meetings with folks who are for-profit entities and they are either wanting to partner with us for fiscal sponsorship for their nonprofit or charitable arm, or maybe they're also doing that on their own. I think Juan pointed out some really great guidelines, and the key is that the money is not flowing from the nonprofit into the for-profit. So the for-profit can make donations to the nonprofit, but that's where it's really helpful to very clearly delineate what is the nonprofit work, where is that funding coming from, separately from the for-profit.
I have a question.
Yes.
I do have, I do, I did create a nonprofit,
Okay.
and for the last year, I've been researching places where I can get some extra help as far as establishing board members.
Mhm.
And also I have been working on a business plan. I keep changing it because different information keeps popping up. My nonprofit is basically focusing on serving domestic violence within the Native communities. And it's really a struggle to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
So when I do search the internet to look for services as far as board members, they are available, but I want to kind of focus on within communities. Let's say I would want a board member from Eastern Navajo Nation, Western, Central, Southern. So that way I have a board member that's kind of like within the nation. And then also, again, I've been struggling with business plan. So there's a lot that goes into creating a nonprofit.
Yes.
And sometimes, information comes across and it's like, yay, I got this. And then as you start talking to the people in that organization that will help, it kind of just becomes like, okay, either you don't hear back from them, or your situation is just completely different. Because the reason I say that is because if you're creating a nonprofit within Navajo Nation or other nations, it's kind of had to specialize in a certain way. And that's why it's so difficult for me to complete that business plan, because I want to be stationed out here in Phoenix, but still be able to provide those services and to be able to provide services to victims where they may want to relocate to border towns. Or I say that because it's my own personal journey.
Right.
So
Yeah.
my main question is those the type of the services that you would provide?
Yeah. In terms of helping support, put together a business plan, or even just kind of sitting down with you and thinking through, like, here's what you have, maybe here are some of the roadblocks that you've run into. I mean, we're always happy to be thought partners. And in terms of our fiscal sponsorship program, which we'll talk a little bit about, it could be that maybe it's not, like, the work that you're doing isn't a fit it's something we'd explore through a consultation and getting more information. But even if we're not a fit, I think we'd be happy to kind of think through some of those sticking points with you. Anytime like we have resources that are aware of and can connect you to, we're happy to do that. So I would say, yeah, like we'll definitely try our best to help you think through some of those areas that you're running into trouble. Honestly, I mean, just in full transparency as well. I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about, while yes, like the mission and the work that you're doing is very specialized and unique, some of those issues that you're running into are things that we hear a lot from folks of just having difficulty finding board members that kind of fit what they are looking for, or yeah, kind of fine tuning a business plan that they can get operable and off the ground. So I do think that's where, a fiscal sponsor could step in as well and kind of help provide that backbone structure as folks are ramping up and trying to get started operating.
Yeah, so that seems to be what I'm struggling with right now, because I need to get over that and then start looking for funding or any types of grants, or, a lot of the grants that I do see, they require me to provide board members, which I don't have at this point.
Right. Yeah, and I think we could definitely talk more about that. What we do see a lot in like startup nonprofits especially is board members tend to be people that the founder already knows. So sometimes we see like friends or family or board members as you're kind of getting off the ground so that you can meet that requirement. I mean, if you're thinking long term, you definitely want to expand the board beyond that so that you have board members who are kind of meeting the very unique needs to guide the nonprofit in the long term. But yeah, it's definitely an issue that I think we see.
Yes, I did start off with two board members. We all had the same vision, but
Mhm.
as the years went by, they kind of started, into their own career and stuff. So I just have to go back and really look at that. I do want to research to see where I can get information to get at least two board members on board with me.
Right. Yeah, another potential, I mean, there are some other like community resources as well that we could also, I think I included links in the slideshow, but I know like Arizona Impact for Good, they're based out of Phoenix, but they do serve statewide as specifically a nonprofit alliance that serves the Arizona nonprofit sector. I think they either currently have basically a job board for prospective board members or they're working on one. So those types of resources do exist as well, and we can try to, yeah, kind of do a little bit of searching and provide that out. And then I think I heard you say that you're based in Phoenix, maybe. So we'd also be happy, we can always do like a virtual Zoom call, but we'd be happy to host you at our office and talk more about kind of like specifically what the needs that you have are.
Yes, I do work out of Avondale, Arizona, so I'm
Okay.
just really wanting to get this off the ground,
Yeah, for
because there
sure.
there there is a need out there, and I just feel that I'm just sitting on something, not really doing much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all the effort that you've already put into it because it sounds like it's something that you've been working towards and that there is a need for it. And yeah, our contact information will be provided out after this. So I would say we can get connected and then figure out a time to meet and talk more about it.
Yeah, so from day one creating this nonprofit, I pretty much stumble around and kind of got it to, everything that I needed to do of what you guys went over earlier of starting to do the nonprofit. But now all the paperwork is done and in place. I just need to do the bigger job of getting the organization off the ground.
For sure. Yeah. And securing the funding. And I think sometimes that's a chicken and egg situation too of, how, yeah, it's definitely a difficult spot of that initial startup. But we can talk more with you and see if there's any way that we can help or even just think through some of the trouble spots that you're running into.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think there's another question. in the chat, what are some of the reasons and or strategy behind moving money from an LLC to the nonprofit? Just curious. Sorry, repeat the question. What are some of the reasons and or strategy behind moving money from an LLC to their nonprofit? Like if there's a for-profit arm and a nonprofit.
Well, I think it's, when you are working in the profit sector and you're making profit, and you also have, an idea to help the community, this is one of the reasons that you can think about to open an aside. And then, of course, you can say, well, I can support a nonprofit. You can show in your profit organization that your organization are doing a charitable work as well. So it can be a nice way to give back to the community, because you are a profit organization, but you're doing also, social impact in the community. And the other reason is that depends on where you are located. You can also, show that you wanted to do an impact in a very specific area or service in this community that no one else is working with, right? So, and also it's another opportunity to show your employees that there is a mission outside of the profit sector. So there is a lot of reasons around to do this. And I think it's a decision of the owners. If it's, just an owner or a public organization, of course, they're going to have a director or board of directors, and then they can decide that. But I think that's the most common reasons that you can think about that. So I hope I answered that question.
Another question is, because I noted that we'll be providing templates for the business plan, budget plan, and fundraising plan. So one of the questions was, would the templates provided be suitable for a for-profit business to use in order to establish their nonprofit section or arm?
Definitely these templates can help to that. I mean, if it's focusing for profit organizations, of course, and then those can be adjustable for, depends on what you want to do, right? So if you want to consider these templates or use these templates, yes, definitely you can do it. It's, doable. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll continue on in the slides, but if folks have additional questions that come up, drop them in the chat or unmute, and then we'll get those answered. Okay, so we're going to cover the basics of fiscal sponsorship. At its essence, fiscal sponsorship is the practice of nonprofit organizations offering their tax and legal and tax exempt status, so their 501c3 status, to other groups. We call them projects that are engaged in activities related to the sponsoring organization's mission. So that's where maybe you're an unincorporated entity, maybe you're a coalition, you don't have your own 501c3 status, but you want to operate as a nonprofit. You can utilize another nonprofit's 501c3 status to then receive grant funding, charitable donations, that sort of thing. There are a wide variety of models in fiscal sponsorship. The two most common that we tend to see are called Model A and Model C. In our program specifically, we call Model A comprehensive and Model C is grant specific. And what essentially that looks like, if you're under Model A, I use like an umbrella analogy, but you're essentially coming as a program under, we'll use TAP AZ for this example, but TAP AZ's umbrella, our 501c3 umbrella, you're coming in as a program. And so you on paper don't exist as your own entity. You are part of TAP AZ as an organization. So, and we'll kind of get into the different services and whatnot, but we're doing your accounting, we're handling your finances, we're providing that backbone infrastructure for you. Whereas in a Model C, our relationship is very specific to a particular grant or scope of work. We are receiving the grant funding on your behalf and then managing it for you. So it's not like we're not serving all of the programming and managing all the programming that you're doing. The scope of work is much narrower. So those are the two main types we see, but there are a wide variety of other models out there. Okay, I hope this video works. This is a quick little explainer video. We'll kind of recap what it goes over, but I just like the analogy that they use, and it's a really easy way to kind of explain what is fiscal sponsorship and why might you use it. So I'm going to play this really quickly.
So you've got a great idea and you're ready to hit the ground running. Your mission-driven project will be a great benefit to your community. To get things going, you'll need to raise funds, line up some sort of administrative infrastructure, and get tax-exempt status. It might be natural for you to think you need to jump right into the 501c3 application process to start a nonprofit. But did you know that there's an alternative? Starting a 501c3 nonprofit is a bit like jumping into the deep end of the pool. It's a lengthy and involved process that isn't a fit for every charitable project. And it could turn out that you don't enjoy swimming, or maybe the water is too cold. But once you start a nonprofit, you're already in the water and have no choice but to swim. You get the point. To put it another way, you may be getting in over your head when there are other ways to enjoy the water. Fiscal sponsorship allows you to wade into the work and test out the waters. You can discover if the water is the right temperature for your work, and if you like swimming or not. Starting out with fiscal sponsorship also gives you the benefit of having a coach, someone who can guide you as you move at your own pace. A good fiscal sponsor is a financially strong nonprofit organization with the capacity, structure, and experience to provide administrative services, oversight, and guidance. They assume some financial responsibility related to you and your project. Partnering with a fiscal sponsor allows you to gain tax-exempt status while devoting your energy to your mission and supporters rather than infrastructure. It also offers a low-risk way to test new ideas. It's a great way to give yourself time to figure out how to approach the project. Your fiscal sponsor will be a partner, a champion of your charitable purpose. They'll help you operate according to best practices. Depending on the type or model of sponsorship and your specific sponsor, they may also offer additional administrative support, training, and financial management. And a good fiscal sponsor is a trusted expert that knows the landscape of the local nonprofit and fundraising communities. So, how do you know if fiscal sponsorship is right for you? Well, your project, program, or initiative has to have a charitable purpose. Remember, the sponsor is putting their IRS 501c3 status on the line when sponsoring your project. Your initiative has to align with the sponsor's mission. Your initiative can be a specific project with a short lifespan, or it could be an ongoing program that eventually leads to 501c3 status. Fiscal sponsorship isn't limited by a project's scope or budget. It doesn't matter if yours is a small project with a small budget, or if it's large in scope with millions of dollars in the budget. You can still benefit from fiscal sponsorship. If you're interested in learning more about fiscal sponsorship, contact Propel Nonprofits.
Okay, so I just like to show that video because I think they do a great job with it. The analogy of fiscal sponsorship that just is done in a very fun way. So we'll kind of talk through some of the reasons that they, so sorry, see if I can change the slide. There we go. Okay, so what are some reasons you might consider utilizing fiscal sponsorship as opposed to going ahead and establishing a 501c3? One, the process. For those of you, it sounds like some of the folks online at least have already gone through the process of becoming a 501c3, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of paperwork. You kind of already get established as a 501c3 entity. So if you choose to utilize a fiscal sponsor prior to becoming a 501c3, that allows you to kind of like test out the concept of the work and the programming without going through that process with the IRS and getting established and then having the reporting requirements each year. That allows you to have the fiscal sponsors like expertise that they bring in terms of the back office support, the finances and accounting. You have that solid administrative and operational structure that you're able to rely on so that you can focus on your mission, build up your programming. So you have that additional support before kind of like going off and operating on your own. That could also give you the opportunity to build up your organization's capacity. It also has the opportunity to allow you to meet certain grant requirements. So definitely like federal funding opportunities. Some other funders or grant makers have certain grant requirements. So whether it's audited financials or they want to see you've been operating for a certain period of time or that you have a certain budget level, you as a new organization might not have that, but your fiscal sponsor does. So you can utilize their financial history, their audited finances, their budgets to meet those funding requirements so that you have the opportunity to qualify for the grant funding. And you also have the opportunity to work with professionals who are familiar with the nonprofit sector. As Juan mentioned, I know within TAP-AZ, we've been around functioning as an established program since 2011. So and a lot of other fiscal sponsors as well just have those connections in the nonprofit sector that maybe you as a startup nonprofit haven't established yet. So having the ability to get connected with folks is always a good option as well. I did make a note of, are there any reasons organization might not choose to go and like partner with a fiscal sponsor? And I think it really depends on like what your organization's needs are. There are some funders who don't allow for fiscal sponsors and grant opportunities. So I did just want to be like very transparent about that. I know that's something Juan and I are constantly working on, is having those conversations with funders and, you know, providing some support and education to them about fiscal sponsorship and how it is a great option. But sometimes that might preclude you from a grant opportunity depending on what the funder's criteria is. If you already have a 501c3 established, you might want to build up your own financial history and not utilize the fiscal sponsor's financial history. So that could be maybe more like a stepwise approach of you utilize a fiscal sponsor, but then kind of like off board and off ramp and start building up your own finances. I think those are mostly the reasons potentially why not, but it really depends on like what your organization's goals and needs are. I think I see a question. Okay. 2 questions really quickly in the chat that I want to get to. If a nonprofit has a for-profit arm, what are some benefits of having that for-profit or vice versa in this scenario? So more so like if the for-profit is doing, or the nonprofit is doing for-profit options, is that?
I guess I kind of understand the question. If a nonprofit had a profit arm, what are some benefits having?
I can clarify if you'd like me to.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking, like, say there's a nonprofit that has a for-profit arm. What are some of the things that, like, for example, a for-profit can do that a nonprofit can't do? Like, what are some of the benefits that each can fulfill that the other can't?
Okay, well, it can be a tax solution maybe for the organization, and that's why the organization open a profit, area. That profit area can support the nonprofit in terms of revenue. If this money is focusing your programs that you have in a nonprofit, right? So, for example, nonprofits can have contracts, agreements with other organizations to provide services. You can make a little bit a profit there because you can pay employees, you can pay other services, but you need to cover, also, the maintenance of your building or these kind of things. So that's when you make a little bit a profit there, right? So that's one of the benefits that you can do if you are a nonprofit. You can do that, but like I said, this profit needs to be for the purpose of the nonprofit, right? In the other side, if you are a profit organization, if you have a nonprofit arm, then whatever are the resources that you send it to the nonprofit needs to be very specific and very focused on the mission of these programs, right? It's not going to be only about, I want to make this as a tax deduction and that's it. No, you need to provide the services. You need to prove that you are doing these services as a nonprofit. So those are more or less the options that I can provide. So
I was thinking, like, for lobbying, if you're a nonprofit organization, but you have a for-profit arm, like, are you able to do lobbying on the causes, like whatever your mission is aligned with, the social causes, and your for-profit aligns with that? Could you do lobbying for that through your for-profit arm?
you can do lobbying, but you need to be, understand that when you need to report this, as an organization, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to operate a lobbying. For example, TAPAZ as an organization, we don't support organizations that they are doing 100% lobbying. So this is, depends on the organization. But yes, I mean, definitely you can do it, but you need to follow the rules that you need to submit the report every year with what you are doing specifically, right? So, and also it's a social thing. I mean, if you support, different political, initiatives, then that's is going to be depends on your organization mission, of course.
And then another question that we have as well is, if someone goes through fiscal sponsorship, does that mean the individual is definitely on track to become a for-profit or a nonprofit, sorry? Or does it allow an individual to test the water and get out if they decide it's not a fit? Is there a risk of using fiscal sponsorship? Yeah, so you could start under fiscal sponsorship, not establishing your own nonprofit or 501c3. You can utilize the fiscal sponsor, test the concept. And there's a fiscal sponsorship agreement that's put into place with a fiscal sponsor that kind of details what their roles and responsibilities are, what your roles and responsibilities, and there should be a termination clause that spells out, I know with TAPAZ, we have a 30-day termination clause. Either party can determine that, the project can decide to offboard for whatever reason and close the account with us. If they have charitable funds still in their account with TAPAZ, those funds can only be re-granted to a nonprofit. So it has to be in alignment with what that project's mission was. So we just had an example of this. An arts-based group was with us for fiscal sponsorship. They're closing out their project, but they still had some funding with us. So they were able to identify a different nonprofit that's working in the arts space that they want to re-grant their remaining funds to. So there's a little bit of like logistics to follow in terms of closing out the account, but you're not, locked into become a nonprofit if you utilize fiscal sponsorship. Sometimes there's like I think I mentioned a step down approach. So maybe you're with a fiscal sponsor for a couple years, you determine you do want to become a nonprofit 501c3. And so we can kind of like start to taper the type of support provided until you're ready to go off on your own and offboard and function as your own 501c3. I would say, and Juan, you can definitely chime in about the question of, is there a risk using a fiscal sponsor? I would just say, make sure you do your homework and due diligence on who you're using as a fiscal sponsor, because really any nonprofit 501c3 can technically serve as a fiscal sponsor. They have that ability, but not all entities are really set up with the infrastructure to provide fiscal sponsorship. So, and we have this as a handout, and then also we'll cover some slides on this, but definitely like doing your research for sure online, but then doing a consultation with your prospective fiscal sponsor, being able to ask questions about their program, figuring out if it's a fit for your needs. Because yes, just because an entity can provide fiscal sponsorship doesn't mean necessarily that it's necessarily going to work out. So I think that due diligence piece is super important. And I would say that's maybe one of the like higher risks of using a fiscal sponsor, but there are a lot of really great fiscal sponsors that we work with and partner with throughout the country. And I would say as well, like it's a really relatively low risk way to like get involved and start working in the nonprofit sector without having to go through the process of becoming your own 501c3.
Just to add one more thing in those comments from Kelsey is that once you are doing this research, try to find the right fiscal sponsor. Also consider that the fiscal sponsor understand what you are doing as an organization. If they don't get it, if they don't, understand what is your mission, what is your programs, they can be a risk, right? Because they need to remember that this is going to be your legal entity. In the meantime, you get the status. So it is very important that the fiscal sponsor understand what you are doing, where you are doing these programs, and who is your target in the community, right? So if they understand that, then I highly suggest that explore this opportunity. Like Kelsey mentioned, once you are established, whatever you make in revenue, we can, I mean, this fiscal sponsor can re-grant this money to your organization. So it's a good way.
Thanks, Juan. And actually, kind of along with that, the next slide is talking about considerations. So when exploring fiscal sponsorship options, some things to consider would be, is there mission alignment? So based on the mission or the programming that you're providing in the community, does the fiscal sponsor have alignment there in their mission? What services does the fiscal sponsor offer, and what are the associated costs for each service? Does the fiscal sponsor have eligibility criteria? So do they require projects to have a minimum budget? Are they working in a specific geographic area? Does your entity meet those criteria? Is there opportunity to maybe like ramp up to meet the criteria? It can be helpful also, and I would highly, highly encourage to request a consultation and a conversation with the fiscal sponsor to ask very specific questions to make sure it is a fit for your needs. And then we have a couple sample questions, but we do have a handout, and then we'll send it a digital copy as well that has just a very extensive checklist. You don't have to ask all of those questions, but I think they're questions that are kind of broken up into categories. So use what feels right for you. But a lot of those are questions that when Juan and I are having consultations, we're typically discussing with folks. So what types of projects do you tend to support? So that could be mission area, again, geographic area. Are you supporting projects that are relatively small with X budget size? Do you support startup nonprofits, or do you want nonprofits to have, or projects, if they're not an established nonprofit, like, do you want them to have certain baseline, like a business plan already put together before they onboard? So what are those like intake criteria that the fiscal sponsor is looking for or requires? What financial services do you provide? So is it bookkeeping? Do you provide audits? Do you do human resources and payroll? What is the suite of services you provide? Will you review and submit grants on our behalf? Does that include grant writing services, or are they just reviewing the grants and the budget and submitting them on your behalf to then receive and manage the funds? Is there a term limit for the fiscal sponsorship relationship? Again, a fiscal sponsorship agreement should definitely have the termination clause that kind of spells out how to offboard if and when the time is right. And it's TAP AZ at this point, we don't have a term limit, so we can be your fiscal sponsor for an indefinite period of time, but some other fiscal sponsors might have a 1 or 2 year term limit. It kind of just depends on the organization. What is your fee structure? So does the fiscal sponsor charge a flat rate, or do they have a percentage that they charge, or is it tiered? What does that look like? What are the associated costs? And then what is the intake or application process? So how do you get started if it is a good fit for you? And again, we will send a list that has way more questions than that, but those are some of the ones that we felt like were super important to cover. I want to pause here again and just see if anyone has any questions on anything related to that. I don't see any. Okay, perfect. We're going to keep rolling then. I included in the PowerPoint, so these are linked. We'll send the slides out, and then we can also pull the links as well to just provide in an email. But these are some different nonprofit development resources that we're familiar with, or make referrals for folks to. So I know I already mentioned AZ Impact for Good. That used to be called the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits, but it still functions the same. So they have workshops that they host. I think they do an annual conference. I think they're based in Phoenix, but they do things statewide. They also have a resource directory. So just a good resource to be aware of. The Arizona Economic Resource Center. So this is a program that Local First Arizona has stood up. They're really focused on supporting tribal communities, rural communities. They do provide grant writing support, but they do have specific criteria. So you can explore if you're eligible for that support on their website. Again, we'll send that out. Instituto Incubator, they're a Phoenix-based group, but they provide capacity building for startup nonprofits. So that is a good resource. We did already talk about Arizona Together for Impact Fund. So this is the group that provides funding support for nonprofits or startup organizations that are exploring collaboration with other groups. The National Council on Nonprofits is just a really great online resource for like anything related to nonprofits, whether it's building a board or running a board meeting or developing a business plan. Like, that's an extensive resource that I can't recommend enough. And then the National Network for Fiscal Sponsors. So this is a national network that TAP AZ is a part of, but They have a member directory. They also have like recommendations on kind of, I think like the handout we provided, questions to ask a fiscal sponsor. What are the basic things we need to know about fiscal sponsorship? So that is just a good resource as well as it relates to fiscal sponsorship. And then we'll play a very short video about Tap AZ. And then I think, yeah, if there are any lingering questions, we're happy to answer those. If not, we will hand it back over, I think, to Raquel, maybe? Yes, to close us out. Okay.
It takes all of us to shape a healthy, thriving Arizona. At Tap AZ, we support nonprofits in all stages of development to achieve their mission and best serve their communities. Whether you have a startup organization or an established 501c3 seeking to take your organization to the next level, we are here to help. Your organization is serving a specific purpose and has unique needs, which is why we offer 3 different levels of fiscal sponsorship.
The Technical Assistance Partnership of Arizona, also known as Tap AZ, is an affiliate of Vitals Health Foundation that provides fiscal sponsorship and capacity building support to nonprofits.
Las solicitudes de subvenciones y las tareas administrativas, Tap AZ permite a las organizaciones mantenerse centradas en su misión y al mismo tiempo garantizar una gestión y un cumplimiento sólido.
Together, we can create a better Arizona, one project at a time.
One more thing that I forgot to mention that I'm just going to talk about very quickly, but all of this information is on the Tap AZ website if you're interested in exploring fiscal sponsorship, specifically with Tap AZ. But we do have support for organizations that are already established 501c3s. The focus of this has really been on maybe folks who are unincorporated or haven't established a 501c3, but we do have support options for you've already incorporated with the IRS, you are a 501c3, but maybe you need additional support. So that's where some of our other levels of service would come into play, whether it's partnering specifically around grant opportunities and leveraging our expertise in that area, or providing outsourced bookkeeping and doing the financial and accounting management for you as well. So there are options if you're kind of sitting here thinking, well, I already established a 501c3. There are fiscal sponsorship support options for you as well. So I just wanted to mention that. Yes. Okay. What are the average rates for using a fiscal sponsor? I understand there may be a range, but just curious what this range looks like in Arizona and if you're able to answer this nationally. So Tap AZ, we charge a 7% administrative cost for all funds that we're managing. The cost increases to 10% if it's a federal grant that we're managing on your behalf. If we're running payroll and HR for you, it's 1% of the gross amount for payroll. I would say, I think Tap AZ is on like the lower, more reasonable end. Like nationally, we see higher rates than that, like 10%. I don't know if we've seen up to 20%, one says. So it really, I mean, it certainly, I think, depends on like where the fiscal sponsor is based as well. Like if some of our friends in California might charge a little bit more. So it does depend on that. But I know, that's what we charge, that 7 to 10% range. Awesome.
Right. Thank you, Kelsey and Juan. Are there any last questions for our presenters for today from both in person and those of you on Zoom?
Oh, we have an in-person. Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so the question is, if you enter into the fiscal sponsorship program under Model A, so that's that comprehensive level of support, we'll speak specifically to Tap AZ. Does Tap AZ provide coaching support for organizations that want to become 501c3s? I would say yes. I mean, part of like the intake process is us like exploring what your goals as an organization are. So for the folks that do want to become a 501c3, we're happy to provide that additional like capacity building, technical assistance support, whether it is around, it really could be around anything, board of director development. Juan's really great with helping folks build out their budget plan. Something that we've been working on this year in particular is really leaning into fundraising support for our projects. So yes, it's very tailored depending on the needs, but that's something we're happy to provide.